A die press hits with 400 tons of force. It doesn't care about your PowerPoint presentation. My name is Gerald Lipinski, but everyone calls me Jerry. I'm 60 years old, and for 38 of those years, I walked through the gates of the Ford Rouge River Complex. I was a master tool and die maker, a title that doesn't mean much to people who live on spreadsheets. To the guys on the floor, it meant I was the man who kept the blood flowing. For the last 2 decades, my specialty was the heavy transfer dies, the big iron that stamps out the structural bones of every truck that rolls off the line. The meeting was in a glass-walled conference room on the second floor, a place they called the collaboration space. I still had grease under my fingernails from troubleshooting a feeder alignment on press 7. The air in the room was cold, conditioned, and smelled faintly of lemons and something expensive, like the cologne counter at a department store. Hunter Ashworth didn't look up when I walked in. He was 27, with a master's degree from Stanford that was framed in dark, expensive wood on his wall, right next to a motivational poster about synergy. He wore a crisp, button-down shirt, designer cargo pants that probably cost more than my first car, and a pair of brand-new sneakers that had never seen a drop of oil. He was staring at a laptop, his fingers tapping away. Across from him sat a woman from Human Resources, her face a practiced mask of neutrality. I sat. The silence stretched, broken only by the click of his keyboard and the distant rhythmic thunder of the plant, a sound that was as familiar to me as my own heartbeat. It was the sound of money being made, of steel being shaped, of promises being kept to dealers and customers. It was a sound Hunter Ashworth probably filtered out as background noise. If you love stories about underdogs who refuse to stay down, and the sweet justice that comes when experience meets arrogance, hit that like button and subscribe right now. You're going to want to see how this ends. Finally, he closed his laptop. He picked up a single sheet of paper from a neat stack on the table. He still didn't make eye contact. He began to read. Gerald Lipinski, he said, his voice flat and rehearsed. As part of our ongoing strategic realignment and operational optimization, we have made the difficult decision to eliminate certain roles that have been identified as legacy cost centers. Legacy cost. I had been called a lot of things in my life. Marine, husband, father, the guy who could get a £250,000 machine back online by midnight, but never a legacy cost. The phrase hung in the sterile air, meaningless and insulting. Optimization. I'd spent nearly 4 decades building and maintaining the very systems this kid was now optimizing. He droned on, a river of corporate buzzwords washing over me. Paradigm shift, digital transformation, agile workforce. It was a language designed to hold meaning for no one, to create a buffer of jargon between a decision and the person it was destroying. The HR woman slid a thick manila envelope across the table. It landed with a soft thud. Your time here is over, Hunter concluded, finally looking at me. His eyes were clear, untroubled, the eyes of a man who has never had to fix something he broke with his own 2 hands. Your knowledge base is no longer aligned with our forward-looking operational matrix. A dead calm settled over me. There was no surge of blood to my face, no tightening in my chest. It was the same feeling I got when a multi-ton die got jammed halfway through a cycle. Panic is useless. You assess. You analyze. You find the pressure point. I understand, I said. My voice was even. He seemed surprised by my lack of protest. A flicker of something, maybe disappointment, crossed his face. He probably had a script for how to handle a scene, a shouting match, a plea. My quiet acceptance threw him off. The door is right there, he said, a dismissive flick of his manicured hand. Security will escort you to your locker to collect your personal effects. Your badge has already been deactivated. I stood up. I didn't look at the envelope. I knew what was in it. Severance numbers calculated by a formula, COBRA insurance forms, a non-disclosure agreement, a neatly packaged insult. I'd turned and walked out of the cold, quiet room, back toward the sound of the factory, back toward the world I had built and was now being exiled from. Walking across the plant floor with a security guard trailing me was a new kind of humiliation. It was a walk I'd made thousands of times, but this time, eyes followed me. Guys I'd trained, guys I'd helped, guys whose kids' graduation parties I'd attended. They averted their gazes, not out of malice, but out of fear. They saw me, and they saw their own future. A future decided by a 27-year-old with a fancy degree and soft hands. My toolbox, a Kennedy rolling chest I'd bought the year my son was born, was my life story written in steel. Each drawer was organized with a precision that bordered on obsession. Micrometers and calipers, feeler gauges, custom ground wrenches that fit bolts no standard tool would. Tucked in the back of the top drawer, beneath a worn leather-bound copy of the machinery's handbook, was my wallet. And inside my wallet, tucked behind my driver's license, was a small laminated card. It was my UAW certification. Master Die Maker, Class A. Issued in 1998. It was more than a card. It was a key. The breaking point came in February 2020. That was when the old guard really started to retire. The men who had been my mentors. Before that, back in the 90s, the company had tried a major modernization. They brought in a fleet of new, computer-controlled presses from Germany. They were sleek, efficient, and cost a fortune. The consultants who sold them to Ford promised they would make the old iron obsolete. They were wrong. The German presses were fantastic for new, lightweight alloys and complex, high-tolerance stamping. But for the brute force work, the heavy-gauge steel that formed the backbone of the F-Series trucks, nothing could beat the old Danley transfer presses. They were behemoths, installed in the 1970s, mechanical monsters that were simpler, tougher, and more reliable than their digital descendants. They were paid for, and they just kept running. But they were temperamental. They had a personality. You couldn't just download a software patch for them. You had to understand them. You had to feel the vibrations through the concrete floor, hear the subtle change in the rhythm that signaled a gear was wearing, know the exact torque for a bolt that wasn't even in the original manual anymore. During a contract negotiation around 2005, a wise old plant manager named Frank Kowalski, a man who, like me, had come up from the floor, saw the writing on the wall. He saw the company trying to de-skill the workforce to make everyone interchangeable. He and the union leadership worked together. Frank knew the Danley presses were a strategic asset, but their value depended entirely on the handful of men who knew how to keep them alive. So they created a poison pill. Buried deep within the UAW Local 600 contract, in an appendix covering specialized equipment, was Article 14, Section C, Paragraph 2. It stipulated that any work on the primary tooling for the Danley SD 4400 series presses, calibration, major maintenance, or die setup, required the on-site supervision of a UAW member holding a Master Die Maker Class A certification. It was a ghost certification. The training was a brutal, year-long apprenticeship under the last of the original Danley installers. Of the 5 of us who took it, only 2 passed. The other guy, a good man named Charlie, had retired to Florida 7 years ago. That left me. For years, it was just a piece of paper in my wallet. A formality. New managers would come and go, and the old hands like me would quietly handle the Danleys, and no one in an office ever thought to ask why. The institutional memory was held on the floor, not in a corporate database. Hunter Ashworth, with his MBA and his faith in digital transformation, had never read Article 14, Section C, Paragraph 2. I was sure of it. He had looked at my salary, my age, my job title, and seen a number on a spreadsheet. A legacy cost? He had no idea he wasn't just firing a 60-year-old mechanic. He was taking the entire Danley press line offline. He just didn't know it yet. The security guard watched me as I slowly, methodically, cleared out my toolbox. I wiped down each tool with an oil rag and placed it carefully into a set of canvas rolls. My personal tools, my property, the company-issued gear I left behind. When I was done, the big red chest was empty. It echoed when I closed the final drawer. I rolled it over to a corner and left it. Let them deal with it. I picked up my lunchbox and walked toward the exit. I didn't look back. I drove home in my 1989 Oldsmobile Cutlass Kira. The car was almost as old as Hunter Ashworth. It had 240,000 miles on the original engine, a dashboard full of cracks, and a headliner that was starting to sag. My wife, Sarah, hated it. She wanted me to buy a new truck, something comfortable, but the Olds ran. It never failed me. I understood it. I knew every sound it made, every vibration. When something was wrong, I knew how to fix it. It was an honest machine. When I got home, Sarah was in the kitchen. She saw my face, saw the lunchbox in my hand, and saw the time on the clock. It was only 11:30 a.m. She knew immediately. She didn't say anything, just came over and put her arms around me. The warmth of her embrace was the first thing I'd felt all day. "It's okay," I said into her hair. "I need to go work on the Camaro." The garage was my sanctuary, and in the center of it, up on jack stands, was my real project. A 1969 Chevrolet Camaro. Not a numbers-matching Z/28 collector's item, just a solid, honest, straight six car that I was slowly turning into the machine I'd always wanted. I was in the middle of a full restoration. The body was already stripped, primed, and waiting for paint. I was rebuilding the front suspension. I switched on the radio, letting an old rock station fill the space. I picked up a torque wrench and got to work on the upper control arm bushings. The familiar weight of the tool in my hand, the clean, satisfying click as the bolt reached its specified tension. This was a world that made sense. There were rules. There were tolerances. There was a right way and a wrong way, and the difference was not a matter of opinion. My phone buzzed in my pocket around 2 p.m. It was Mike, one of the younger supervisors, a good kid I'd trained myself. "Jerry, they really did it?" he asked, his voice low. "They did it, Mike." There was a pause. I could hear the clatter of the plant behind him. "It's already a mess, man. They had me trying to troubleshoot that feeder on 7, the one you were looking at this morning. The new kid from engineering came down with a tablet, said the diagnostic app showed it was a sensor issue. He spent an hour replacing it. Didn't fix a thing. Turned out to be a worn mechanical stop, just like you said it probably was." "I know," I said. "This new guy, Ashworth, he sent out an email, a real piece of work, all about a new era of efficiency. The guys are spooked, Jerry." "Let them be spooked, Mike. You just do your job. Keep your head down." "Yeah, but you were the guy. What are we going to do when one of the big ones goes down?" "You're going to call your supervisor," I said calmly, "and he's going to call his manager, and eventually they'll call someone who can't fix it. That's the new era of efficiency." I hung up and went back to the Camaro. I worked for the rest of the day, losing myself in the methodical process. I didn't think about Hunter Ashworth. I didn't think about Ford. I thought about bolt patterns and bearing grease and the perfect gap between a fender and a door. 2 days before the humiliation, Hunter had held a town hall on the plant floor. He stood on a makeshift stage, looking uncomfortable and out of place amidst the machinery. He talked for 20 minutes, using his PowerPoint slides to illustrate a future of automation and data-driven synergy. He pointed to a picture of a robot. "This is the future," he declared. "We need to be leaner, more agile. We can't be held back by legacy thinking or outdated processes." I was standing in the back with a few other senior guys. We didn't say a word. We just watched. He had no idea that the robot he was pointing at was welded to a floor bracket that had been stamped on a Danley press. He didn't know that the power conduit feeding it was held up by supports stamped on a Danley press. He was celebrating a future built on a foundation he had just declared obsolete. That same evening, after the town hall, I went home and, for the first time in years, pulled out my old copy of the UAW contract. I sat at the kitchen table and read Article 14, Section C, Paragraph 2, over and over again. Sarah asked me what I was doing. Just checking my insurance policy, I told her. Now, 2 days later, I knew I was about to file a claim. The call I was waiting for didn't come on day 1. It didn't come on day 2. The plant ran, but it was limping. I heard through the grapevine, from Mike and a few other loyalists who called to check in, that small problems were cascading. Downtime was ticking up, minute by minute. A misaligned transfer arm here, a failed hydraulic valve there. Problems I would have spotted an hour before they happened, or fixed in 20 minutes, were now turning into multi-hour ordeals involving engineers, frantic calls to vendors, and a lot of confused pointing at schematics on a tablet. Hunter Ashworth, I was told, was blaming it on resistance to change. He held meetings about attitude and morale. He sent more emails. He was a general trying to win a war by redesigning the uniforms. I knew for sure 3 weeks ago when the new production schedule was posted. They were finishing a run of body panels for the Explorer. The next major job on the schedule was a big one, a 2-month run of tailgate reinforcement brackets for the new F-150 Lightning. It was a high priority, high margin part, and the tooling for it was designed for one place and one place only, the Danley SD4400 line. I knew the schedule better than the people who made it. I knew the die sets for that job would need to be pulled from storage, cleaned, calibrated, and installed. It was a 3-day process that required a dozen things that existed only in my head. The precise shim measurements for die set 4A, the temperamental nature of the number 3 transfer carriage, the exact hydraulic pressure needed to avoid microfractures in the first stage stamping. The call came on a Thursday afternoon, 6 days after I was fired. I was wet sanding the primer on the Camaro's hood, my hands covered in gray sludge. My phone, sitting on the workbench, rang. The caller ID said Ford Motor Company, Rouge Complex. I wiped my hands on a rag, took a slow breath, and answered. Jerry's garage. Jerry. It's Dave Miller. Dave Miller was the plant manager. A good man, a company man, but a fair one. He was an engineer by trade, but had been around long enough to respect the guys on the floor. We'd always had a decent relationship. He was one of the few managers who would come down to the floor, ask questions, and actually listen to the answers. Hey Dave, what can I do for you? I kept my tone light, casual. Jerry, we've got a problem. A big one. He sounded tired, stressed. I could hear shouting in the background. We're trying to set up the dies for the lightning bracket job on the Danley line. Okay, I said, as if I had no idea what he was talking about. They can't get them set. The crew. They don't know how. They've been at it for 2 days. We're burning time, Jerry. We were supposed to start the run yesterday. This is costing us about $92,000 an hour in downtime. I did the math in my head. A day and a half of downtime. Over $1 million. And counting. That's a shame, I said, picking up a piece of sandpaper. Sounds like a tough problem. Tough doesn't cover it. We're about to be in breach of contract with a major supplier. This is a $16.8 million parts run, Jerry. The union steward just came to my office. He's filed a grievance. He says we're in violation of the collective bargaining agreement. Oh, I said, feigning surprise. Yeah, something about Article 14, Section C, says we need a Class A certified master die maker to supervise the tooling setup on the Danleys. My people have been tearing the place apart. We checked the records. The only one on the books is a guy who retired in 2017. And you. The trap had sprung. It was a beautiful thing. Is that so? I said, my voice quiet. Jerry, stop. Dave's voice was ragged. I know what happened. I wasn't in the loop on the decision to let you go. It came from corporate, from Ashworth. It was a mistake. A goddamn stupid mistake, and I'm in the middle of cleaning it up. Sounds like a mess, Dave. It is. Listen, I need you to come back. We'll fix this. We'll get your job back. Full back pay. Everything. I just need you to come in and get this line running. He was begging. A plant manager, begging. Here's what Dave Miller and Hunter Ashworth and all the rest of them didn't know. This wasn't just about a job anymore. They hadn't just fired me. They had declared my entire life's work, my knowledge, my experience, as worthless. A legacy cost? They had shown me exactly how much my loyalty was worth to them. Nothing. So my loyalty was no longer for sale. But my knowledge? My knowledge was. At a premium. I put the sandpaper down. I walked over to the open garage door and looked out at the quiet suburban street. My street. My house. My peace. I had given that up for 38 years, for midnight calls and ruined weekends. Not anymore. Dave, I said, my voice changing. The casual tone was gone. It was now the voice I used when a press was down and a half-dozen engineers were shouting at each other. The voice that cut through the noise. Let me be very clear. I do not work for Ford Motor Company anymore. I am not interested in getting my job back. Silence on the other end of the line. I could picture him, standing in his office overlooking the silent, stalled Danley line. What do you mean? He finally stammered. I mean, I'm a private citizen, Dave. I'm in my garage, working on my car. I'm enjoying my retirement. It's been 6 whole days, and it's growing on me. Jerry, you don't understand the position we're in. Oh, I think I understand it better than anyone, I said. I understand you have $80 million worth of tooling for a series of presses that are absolutely essential for your most profitable product line. And I understand that, according to a contract your company signed, those presses can't be touched without a certification that only one man possesses. And I understand that your company, in its infinite wisdom, decided that man was a legacy cost. More silence. The shouting in the background of his office seemed to have stopped. He was probably alone now. What do you want, Jerry? He asked. His voice was defeated. This was the moment. The pressure point. I'm not an employee, Dave, but I am a consultant. My expertise is available for a fee. A fee? How much? My consulting rate is $2,000 an hour, with an 8-hour daily minimum. Billed from the moment I leave my driveway to the moment I return. Portal to portal. I heard a sharp intake of breath. 2,000 an hour. It was an absurd number. It was also, I knew, a fraction of the 92,000 an hour they were currently losing. And I'll need a contract, a personal services contract, drawn up by my lawyer, paid for by you. It will state, among other things, that my advice is my only deliverable. I am not liable for any outcome. I will not lay hands on a single tool. I will supervise. I will instruct. That's it. Jerry, that's insane. Is it? You have my number, Dave. You and the board can discuss it. In the meantime, the meter is running on your downtime, not on mine. I was about to hang up, but I had one more condition. The most important one. Oh, and Dave? There's one more thing. A non-negotiable. What is it? Before I even consider looking at a contract, Hunter Ashworth has to be gone, not transferred, not reassigned, fired. I want him escorted off the property by the same security guards who walked me out. I want his parking spot empty and his nameplate gone from the door. You have until noon tomorrow to make that happen. If he is still an employee of Ford Motor Company at 12:01 p.m., my consulting rate doubles. Tell him to clean out his desk. Then we'll talk. I hung up the phone. I didn't wait for a reply. A profound sense of quiet satisfaction washed over me. It wasn't about revenge. It was about balance. It was about the restoration of order. A die press hits with 400 tons of force. A man's life's work has a weight of its own. They were about to learn that. I went back to sanding the hood of the Camaro. The rhythmic motion was soothing. I didn't know if they would call back. In a way, I didn't care. I would be fine either way. The power was no longer theirs. It was mine. The next morning, my phone rang at 10:15 a.m. It was Dave Miller. "He's gone, Jerry," he said. No preamble. He cleared out his desk this morning. Security walked him to his car 10 minutes ago. "Good," I said. "My legal team is talking to your lawyer right now. The contract will be ready for you to sign this afternoon. Can you come in?" "I'll be there at 1 o'clock, I said. "And Dave?" "My clock starts the moment I pull out of my driveway." I hung up and went inside to shower. I didn't put on my old work clothes. I put on a clean pair of jeans, a polo shirt, and a pair of comfortable shoes. I was no longer an employee going to work. I was a consultant going to a client site. Driving to the Rouge in my old Cutlass, I felt a sense of detachment. I passed the same landmarks I'd passed for 38 years, but it felt different. I wasn't owned by this place anymore. I was a visitor, a highly paid one. I didn't park in the main lot. Dave had arranged for a visitor's spot for me, right up front. The security guard at the gate, a man I'd known for 20 years, just nodded as I approached. He had a new list. My name was at the top. Dave met me in the lobby of the main administration building. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He led me to a conference room, not the same one where I was fired, but a larger one. A team of lawyers and executives were there. The manila envelope with my severance was gone. In its place was a thick, leather-bound portfolio. My new contract. My lawyer, a sharp guy who usually handled real estate closings, had already been through it. He'd added a few clauses of his own. I spent 20 minutes reading it. The terms were exactly as I had specified. $2,000 an hour, 8-hour minimum, no liability. The contract was for 6 months, with an automatic renewal unless terminated by me with 30 days' notice. I picked up the silver pen they offered me. It felt heavy, substantial. I signed my name, Gerald Lipinski, consultant. "All right, Dave," I said, closing the portfolio. "Let's go see about your problem." Walking onto the plant floor was like a king returning from exile. The word had spread like wildfire. The noise of the plant seemed to dip as I walked past. Guys stopped what they were doing. They didn't cheer or shout. It was something better. It was a sea of slow, knowing nods. Respect. They saw one of their own, who had been cast out, return not on his knees, but on his own terms. It was a victory for all of them. The Danley line was a crime scene. It was surrounded by yellow caution tape. A group of engineers and supervisors stood around, looking lost. The massive die set for the lightning bracket was hanging crooked from the overhead crane halfway into the press bed. I walked up, not breaking my stride. I didn't need to examine anything. I could see the problem from 50 feet away. "Your transfer carriage is out of alignment by about 1/16 of an inch," I said, to no one in particular. "And you've got the die set canted. You're trying to force it. You keep that up. You're going to shear the locating pins and score the press bed. You do that, and you can sell this whole line for scrap metal." They all turned to look at me. The young engineer who had been in charge, the one with the tablet, opened his mouth to say something. I just looked at him. He closed it. "All right," I said, turning to the senior crew chief, a man named Sal I'd worked with for 15 years. "Get that die out of there. Slowly. Then, I want you to get me a full diagnostic on the number 3 carriage hydraulics. Check the pressure logs for the last cycle. I bet you'll find a pressure drop that nobody noticed." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The authority in my voice wasn't granted by a title or a business card. It was earned. forged over decades in the heat and noise of this very floor. For the next 6 hours, I stood there, arms crossed, and I talked. I told them exactly what to do, step by step, how to reshim the carriage guides, how to bleed the hydraulic line, the proper sequence for tightening the die set clamps, the little tricks and bits of knowledge that were never written down. At 7:30 p.m., Sal hit the cycle start button. The massive press came to life with a familiar, powerful rhythm. The first stamped bracket came off the line 30 seconds later. It was perfect. A wave of relief washed over the faces of the executives watching from a safe distance. Dave Miller walked over to me, his face etched with gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you, Jerry." "You already are," I said, glancing at my watch. "My 8 hours are up. I'll send you my invoice in the morning. I'll be back tomorrow at 9 to oversee the production ramp-up." I turned and walked away, leaving them to their running press. 6 months later, the plant was running smoother than it had in years. My presence had a calming effect. I became a mentor, a final court of appeal. I started training 2 younger guys, handpicked by me, on the intricacies of the Danleys. I was passing on the knowledge, but on my own terms, ensuring it wouldn't be lost again. My contract was renewed without a question. The $2,000 an hour became a flat, monthly retainer of $100,000, whether I came in for 1 day or 20. I mostly came in for 10. The 1969 Camaro was finished. It was gleaming in my garage, a perfect coat of Le Mans blue paint, the rebuilt engine humming. I had the time. I had the money. More importantly, I had peace of mind. I was home for dinner every night. Sarah and I took a long vacation, our first in over a decade. The strain that years of thankless overwork had put on us began to fade. Sometimes I would drive the Camaro over to the park that overlooks the Rouge complex. I'd sit there and look at the place, the smokestacks, and the sprawling buildings. It was a part of me, but it no longer owned me. They had tried to turn my legacy into a liability. They failed. They learned that some assets don't show up on a spreadsheet, and that control isn't about a title. It's about knowing where the real keys to the castle are hidden, and for 38 years, I was the only one who had a copy. My name is Jerry Lipinski. I'm 61 years old now, and I am not a legacy cost. I am the man you call when your spreadsheets fail. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hit that like button if you enjoyed the story, and leave a comment below telling me about a time when experience won out over a fancy degree. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories of sweet, methodical justice.